Every year, around 10,000 people are injured and sadly around 500 are killed by unsafely handling firearms. In today's video, we are going to go over the 4 basic rules of firearm safety and introduce you on how to be safe handling firearms. Even if you're an experienced shooter, some of these tips may help you as you teach someone new to firearms. Let us first start with the 4 basic rules of firearm safety. Rule number 1: treat every firearm as if it's loaded. This seems easy, but so many people start breaking the universal safety rules as soon as the gun is unloaded. Don't believe me? Check out your local gun show, and sadly, you will see just how unsafe people can be. While we're on the subject of unloading your firearms, you should always follow the deliberate unloading procedure when rendering your firearm safe to handle. First, eject the magazine, then lock the slide to the rear. Check to make sure you can see the ground through the magazine well. Then inspect the breech face, then inspect the chamber. In low light conditions, you can use a finger to feel for the presence of a live cartridge. Let the slide forward. While pointing the weapon in a safe direction, pull the trigger. Follow these steps every time in a consistent way to help ensure you are handling an unloaded weapon while performing dry fire drills, storing the weapon, any type of maintenance, and especially if you hand your firearm to somebody else so they can examine it. You would be surprised how many people will immediately pull the trigger when handed a firearm. On to rule number 2: never point your gun at something you are not willing to kill or destroy. Now, this one does have a pretty big caveat to it. Let's say you're doing some dry fire drills. It's common for people to pick an object like a light switch as a dry fire target. Now, obviously, I don't want to destroy my light switch, but I also want to pick a target that, if by some series of unfortunate events, a live round were to discharge, I wouldn't regret whatever that round destroys for the rest of my life. Here's some quick tips on dry firing your gun. Always follow the deliberate unloading procedure and make certain all ammunition is separate from your dry fire area. Definitely not within accidental reach, especially if you're practicing magazine changes. Preferably, you would remove all ammunition from the room you're training in. Next, never aim at something you wouldn't point a loaded gun at. Be mindful of the potential path of that round. Are there people or pets on the other side of that wall? That brings us to our next rule. Be certain of your target and what's beyond it. This is a big one, especially in a self-defense situation. Remember, there's a lawyer attached to every round you discharge. Make certain of your target, identify that you have nothing between you and the target, and make certain you have a backstop free of bystanders or anything else you don't want to destroy in case your round misses or overpenetrates. Now, last but certainly not least, rule number 4. Arguably the most important one, because if you are following this rule, your gun should never go off, well, unless you maybe own a particular model of SIG. Keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are aligned and the decision to fire has been made. There's a reason trigger discipline is taught so heavily, because in 99.9% of cases, that gun is not going to go off unless the trigger is pulled. There are a few exceptions to this, but all those are due to mechanical failures of the firearm. The only way you are going to discharge a round is by manipulating the trigger. Now, there are a few ways an unintentional trigger pull may occur. First and foremost, while being under a high stress situation, your hands naturally want to fall into a fist. There are documented incidents where police officers have negligently discharged their weapons due to a high stress situation and poor trigger discipline. Foreign objects can and will also find their way into the trigger guard if you are not careful. Always make sure your holster is clear of foreign objects, especially while reholstering. Also, if you pocket carry or use any type of off-body carry, make sure there's nothing that can find its way into the trigger guard. Your finger also needs to stay out of the trigger well until the decision to fire has been made and your sights are aligned on target. Now, if you follow all of these rules and your gun is functioning properly, you will never have an accidental or negligent discharge. When accident happens with firearms, multiple firearm safety rules are broken before the incident takes place. Now that we have our safety rules established, let's move on to how to safely handle a firearm in a few different situations. First, let's discuss holsters. You should have a holster that fits your weapon and wear appropriate attire so your holster remains firmly on your person. The other key things to remember, especially if you're concealed carrying, is that cover garments can and will in fact get in the way of your holster, especially if you are trying to reholster your firearm while wearing a cover garment. A good tip here is to always visually look at your holster as you are placing your firearm back in there and take extra precautions to keep your finger out of the trigger well. Another area that beginner shooters have issues with can be the holster draw. One of the biggest mistakes people make while trying to draw their firearms is accidentally pulling the trigger as they are clearing their holster. This is where making sure you have great trigger discipline comes into play. Your fingers should never be on the trigger of your firearm until your sights are aligned and the decision to fire has been made. So, in your drawing process, you will defeat garment if necessary, get a firm grip on the firearm, draw the firearm up to your chest while bringing your support hand into position to establish your two handed grip. At this point, as you are presenting out, your finger can then move to the trigger and begin your trigger prep. You want to gently take up the slack until you find that wall in your trigger and then ease the trigger back the rest of the way until it breaks. Now, the drawing of a firearm is restricted at most gun ranges for safety reasons. As I stated previously, a lot of accidents tend to happen during the drawing process. So, this is where dry fire practice can really reinforce your fundamentals into establishing a proper draw, grip, and stance. I highly recommend that you practice this at home doing dry fire until you have your process down. As a gun owner, you can be and should be excited to show off your guns to other people. It's a great way to hang out with your buddies, but you need to be safe. Under most circumstances outside of the gun range, I will never hand somebody a loaded gun. Simple reason, people, especially those that don't have much experience, tend to point the gun in unsafe directions, typically right back at you, and they also love to press that trigger. I have personally handed a firearm to somebody when I was a new gun owner, and the first thing they did without asking or checking if the gun was loaded was to pull the trigger. Fortunately, I had cleared the pistol before bringing it into the room, but it was an important lesson nonetheless. Thanks, Dad. Firearms can be a lot of fun and have a fundamental role in assuring our rights. Firearms play a critical role as a great equalizer to ensure millions are not victims of a crime. However, with great power comes great responsibility. You need to always take firearm safety seriously. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. It was a lot of fun for me to record. Make sure to subscribe for more firearms content. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.